I don't know how many of you guys are as young as I am, but there was a great philosopher that I grew up paying attention to because I stayed with philosophers when I was younger, and his name was Murdoch, and he was on this team. It was not the B team, but it was the A team, and he always said, I love it when a plan comes together. And I felt like some plans was coming together this morning with the baptisms. I've been trying to get an acoustic worship and stuff, and we had our acoustic worship. The band will be back. We haven't kicked them off or anything, but we had an acoustic worship today. We are also 1 week away from finishing up in our book of Acts, which I've loved going through, and I've learned so much about, like, what does it look like? And all of us understand this firsthand, right? But these guys had, like, Jesus was there. Let's just follow him around and let him be the boss. And then Jesus is gone. Well, who do we follow around now? How do we follow Jesus now? And then we get this whole Acts of the Apostles or Acts of the Holy Spirit book that helps us figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus when he's not around, which is not as easy, I guess, as you would expect it to be. So we're going through that. But one of the things that I also know, how many of you have a life verse? I got a life verse. I met people that are like, I got a life verse. Not a whole bunch of you in here. Okay. I feel like everybody but me had a life verse growing up. I don't even know what a life verse is. But if you have a life verse, there is a high probability that this is it. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. I'll take that one. That's a good one, right? What we have to understand here is he's talking to people who are in slavery. He's talking to the Israelites while they're in bondage, and they're like, it's getting tough. Like, it was good for a little while. We figured some things out, but we've been here for a long time, and it's just wearing down, and I don't know that I have it in me anymore. And then Jeremiah comes along and shares, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And while I know that was written and given to the Israelites while they were in bondage, I sure feel like he has a plan for us still today, to prosper us and not to harm you, to give us hope and a future, because some people walked in here today and they felt a little hopeless. They felt like I could use a little future today, and I've got to let you know that God was there then and God is still here now, and we need to recognize that. See, one of the things that, this is fun, one of the things that I realized when I was going through and I was preparing this is, as we're going through here, I realized this section that we're in today, which is chapters 25 and 26, are probably one of the most boring parts of the New Testament. Preacher, you aren't allowed to say the Bible's boring. But in some places you're like, that's good, a lot of names, and I'm on to the next chapter. Like, we've all been there. Don't act like I'm the only one who's like, what? Like, what am I know God's got something he wants to do with this, but I don't know what it is. But I know in chapters 25 and 26, God has something. He has a plan for it. And, like, hear me, I didn't say it is unnecessary. I didn't say these chapters were useless. I said maybe they're not as fun or exciting as some of the other chapters that are in the New Testament or in the Bible in general. But what we realize is we're going to get into this. Paul has, remember, he's had this goal, this place he has to be. When he was called by God, he said, I'm going to send you to the rulers of the Gentiles and to the Gentiles, and he's got this plan for him and where he wants to go. And Paul's been trying to get there this whole time. And God's like, not yet, not yet. Every time Paul thinks he's heading to Rome to talk to the emperor, God's like, and we're going to have a hard left. And he just changes things on him. And it's got to be tiring. It's got to wear on you a little bit as you're going along. So as he's going through here, we need to know, like, he's in a court battle. Now, if you're a lawyer or one of those people who likes to listen to the chirping of the fire department's going here and the police department's going, I'm like, maybe you like this. Maybe you're like, this is my favorite 2 chapters, Scott. I can't believe you would even say that. But essentially, we get to see the inside of a courtroom here. Isn't that fun? Who wants to sign up for So that's where we are with Paul. We're inside the courtroom here. He's being taken to court and put on trial. And as we go through this, I'm going to pull out some of the background and the context that'll help bring these scriptures alive just a little bit more. But we're in Acts chapter 25, starting in verse 10. Notice I said we're covering 25 and 26. I'm not going to read it all. Y'all got some homework. Go home and read 2 chapters. You can read everything that's going on around it. Verse 10, it says, Paul answered, I am now standing before Caesar's court, when I ought to be tried. I have not done anything wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know very well. I, however, am guilty of doing anything deserving of death. I do not refuse to die. But if charges brought against me by these Jews, and remember, and we'll talk about this, if you're in a Roman court, you're not allowed to bring charges against somebody unless you show up. It's like, oh, I had a traffic ticket. I paid a lawyer. He went and took care of it. That doesn't happen in the Roman courts. So I've got to believe my man Paul is on fire a little. These Jews are not true. No one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. Now here's one of those things that comes along with being a Roman citizen, which Paul is one of very few of that we run into in the New Testament. He is a Jew, true blue, like he is as Jewish as they come, but he was born a Roman citizen. He didn't even buy his way in. He was born a Roman citizen. Rome cared about their people so much that if you didn't think you were being treated right, you could be in your court of law, and in Greensboro, North Carolina, in the smallest court of law, and I appeal to Caesar, you're going directly to the Supreme Court. You're a Roman citizen. At any point, they cannot treat you wrong. You can always say, I appeal to Caesar. And Paul just put down the trump card. He's like, I'm tired of all this fooling around. I know where I need to be. I know what my job is. I'm going there. And after Festus, can we just pause here for just a second? Because there are a couple of names in this chapter that I believe, I don't know that their mama loved them. Do you name your kid Festus? I mean, after Festus had conferred with the council, he declared, you have appealed to Caesar, so to Caesar you will go, Festus. I don't know how many of you in here are pregnant or looking for children's names, but may I suggest Festus? If it is a female, we have one coming for you. A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice, how many got Aunt Bernice? Anybody got it? Okay, Bernice is still running around a little bit. Okay, that's not so bad then. Now that I'm on stage in front of everybody. But King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea to pay their respects to Festus. All right, since they were spending many days there, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king, and he said, there's a man whom Felix has left as prisoner. So when he was originally taken there and put in jail, a different person was in charge. Felix was in charge. He was like, let's throw him in prison, and every once in a while, Felix would bring him back up, hoping Paul would bring a bribe with him, and Paul never did. And then something happens to Felix, and he's not there anymore, and they're like, who's this dude down here in the jail? And they pull him up, and it's Paul. So Felix left him here. And he says, when I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and elders of the Jews brought charges against him and asked that he could be condemned. And I told them that it is not the Roman custom to hand over anyone before they have faced their accusers and have had the opportunity to defend themselves against the charges. Here's another one of those cool things that are going on in Rome. First of all, you've got the chief priests that are the church law, right? They're in charge of the synagogue. They're in charge of everything that happens with the Jewish people. So Paul falls under this law. Paul is also a Roman citizen. So he also falls under this law. And what they're accusing him of is something that falls under the religious side, not under the statehood side. So they're like, okay, let's bring in the experts of the law. But if you guys come here, you've got to show up. And I like it says here, and they had an opportunity to defend themselves against the charges. Here's one of those things that happens in Roman law that doesn't happen anywhere else. Now remember, Rome is ruling the known world at this point. So Rome comes in, they take over an area, they put in one of their puppets to make sure that they're still in charge. They let you keep your gods as long as you add the Roman gods and the emperor to the people you're worshiping, but keep doing what you're doing. We'll take your taxes. We'll put in our leader. We'll go on. Imagine all of the headaches and issues that come along. So many things are changing in the cities and towns now because Rome just came in and took over that there's all kinds of issues. So everybody's taking everybody to court. Well, for Rome, they were like, okay, you can bring people to court. But if you show up to court and you are bringing charges against somebody, like they're doing with Paul, and they want the death penalty for Paul, if they cannot prove their charges, all of you now die. Who wants to bring some charges? All of a sudden, somebody's like, I think I'm good. I don't think I want to take them to court, right? Like, all of a sudden, things change when you're held accountable for what you're accusing somebody else of. I'm sure none of us know anything about that at all. Ever been accused of something you didn't do, and they want you to be punished. They want you to feel the weight of whatever it might be, and you're like, but I didn't. In the Roman court of law, you had to be present, and if you couldn't prove it, whatever punishment you were asking for from that person got given to you. So this gets real serious real quick as they're going along. And as we're going here, I want to also point out something. So we've got Festus, who is, I don't think his mama loved him, but let's say he's sort of like the mayor, right? He's the mayor of a town. Then you've got Agrippa. What was the title that Agrippa had when he shows up? King Agrippa. So King Agrippa shows up, but we've got to think King Agrippa, let's talk about him sort of like being the governor maybe, because he's in charge of this area. Rome, the entire world is run at this point, and the emperor or the king of Rome is Nero. So now we've got these sort of people who are in charge of these little areas, and then we have kings who are in charge of certain areas. Then we have the king who's in charge of all of Rome. So let me ask you this question. Was Jesus the only King of Kings and Lord of Lords? The answer is no. He didn't say that. I'm not coming back to this church next week. There's no way. When I started hearing stuff like this, I was just like, I don't know that I can believe this. Because Jesus is the original, right? But we got to stop thinking like Jesus had to start everything for it to be useful or to be good. There was a lot that happened before Jesus, a lot that happened after Jesus. But what Jesus did is he said, I'm going to use the language that my culture is already using, that it already understands, and I may use it to pick a fight. But Jesus, he didn't fight with anybody. He didn't argue with anybody. You're not reading your Bible. Because he had these slight jabs where he was like, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. They're like, oh, no, that's the Roman emperor. He was like, isn't that cute? You think that he's in charge of the stuff. That's pretty. I see what you did there. I like that. That's good, but it's not right. He used their language. Let me just throw this out here. If you've been a Christian a long time, we talked about this yesterday. If you've been a Christian a long time and you like to use your Christian language that nobody else understands, stop. If you're talking to non-Christians, stop using the $10 words when 3 $1 words will be just fine, and now they understand you. Do that. Jesus took the language from the culture, he used it so they could understand it, and he gave a little body blow while he was there, which I'm a fan of. Like, let's do that. So remember when Paul said he appeals to Caesar, it helps him accomplish the calling that Jesus gave him at the beginning when Jesus called him. Just as a little reminder, in Acts chapter 9, verse 15, this is after Paul is going along. He's trying to kill Christians. He's already sort of helped kill Christians. Now he's got the paperwork to go to all the synagogues and wrap up anybody who says they're following Jesus. And he's walking on this road from one town to another, and he becomes blind. And he hears this voice, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I think I might have messed up. I think I did something wrong. I've never been blind before like this. And he sends Ananias to come get him and to get him on the right road. This is where we pick it up in verse 15. But the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and to their kings and to the people of Israel. He gave him a job. He gave him a role. He said, I don't need you to do what I've got these other guys doing. Here's what I want you to do. Stay in your lane. Go do this. Let me be in charge. of what everything is happening in the kingdom right now. You go do what I put before you. So, it almost looks like when we look at Saul, and Saul who changes his name to Paul because cool people are named Paul at this point, which is sort of half true. We look at this, and if you look at this, it's almost like God made him perfectly designed to do the role that he gave him to do. His role is to go to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. What do we know about Paul? Paul is the most educated of all the followers of Jesus. Maybe the smartest, but easily the most educated. The 12 apostles, they're some blue-collar fellas. Notice when Jesus calls them, so you got these different levels of education, and you go to like almost like the elementary school, and they memorize the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They memorize it. Like I start saying something and you can finish my sentence because you know what is memorized so well. Everybody did that. Every boy did that. If you got to that level and they were like, that boy is struggling, he's not so good now, they send you back home to work with dad. Whatever the family business was, right? You went back and you got your education. Now you had a good foundation and understanding of what our people are about and what we believe. But then you would go from there and you would go to the next level of education and you would memorize the rest of the Old Testament. These were the smarter of the kids because the dumb ones only had the first 5 books of the Bible memorized. Anyone have first whole 5 books of the Bible memorized? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there. This is how they judge that. And then if you did get that, like think of like NBA All-Stars are now going on to be rabbis. Besides that, everybody went back home and took the family business. When Jesus goes and he calls the apostles, where does he go? Where does he find them? At work, doing whatever their dad did. Most of them were fishermen. So these weren't the smartest guys ever. I'm not saying they're dumb, but they aren't Paul. Paul is the most educated, the most intellectually elevated person that we see associated with Jesus. He is a Roman citizen. He can appeal to Caesar at any point. He gets all the protection of Rome. Last week when they were talking about flogging him, and they were going to flog him, and they go to pull him down, he was like, oh, did I mention I was a Roman citizen? Everybody's like, dude, you didn't know that? You didn't ask him that question? Why? And all of a sudden, everybody's afraid that they're now going to be flogged because what you did to me, Rome says, gets done to you. And they're like, no, and they let him go. He's a Roman citizen. He understood both Roman and Jewish systems. So when he said, go to the Jews and to the Gentiles, he gets them both. He was raised by a Pharisee, the strictest of all the Jewish followers of Yahweh. He is the strictest. There's only eat certain things on certain days. You can only have certain things in your house. You can only walk on certain places. On the Sabbath, you're only allowed to walk so far. Still today, you go to like big cities in New York and stuff, you'll see this metal wire around their synagogues and around their neighborhoods that tells them, here's how far you're allowed to go. You're not allowed to walk any further than this on the Sabbath. And they walk back inside. I was just like, that's next level. Like they are still like serious about this stuff. When I was in Israel, we were walking, we went and saw this cave that it looked a lot like maybe the cave Jesus was born in. I'm not saying it was the cave, but how many of us have seen a shepherd's cave in Israel? There's 3 of us. I like that. Yeah, all 3 of us went and saw it. 4 of us, okay. So we're there and we're walking out and we're in like huge fields. And then all of a sudden there's this wire going around and some poles up. And I'm like, what in the world is that? They were like, oh, that's the dividing line. That's how far you're allowed to walk on a Sabbath. I'm like, still today? Like they took their stuff serious. Paul abided by all of that. And because he was crazy smart, he was crazy educated, they brought in the smartest known man in the world to educate him, Gamaliel, so that he could be maybe one of the best Pharisees ever. Paul seems like he was specifically designed, as Psalms tells us, in his mother's womb for the job that he has. And I believe that he was. But what if? Because I'm sure this doesn't happen to any of us, right? We never get somewhere and we're like, you know what? I choose no. What if Paul was in school and while he was being educated the whole time, he got to pre-calc and was like, peace, I'm done. I don't know about pre-calc. We got more letters than numbers in math. It just seems wrong. I'm choosing no. I'm not doing that. I'm like, I get that. I don't even know what pre-calc is. And I hear people say the words. I don't ever plan on doing that math. It's good. What if he decided when his parents were raising him, because I'm sure he would have been the first ever, as his parents were raising him, like, I don't like how my parents are raising me. I'm going to go ahead and move in with a friend. I'm going to go to, because I'm sure he was the first one ever who disagreed with how their parents were doing things, right? Like none of us still do that today. All of our parents got perfect, right? What if he was like, I don't like what you want me to do. I'm out. What if one of the times when he was shipwrecked, or when they had given him 39 lashes, or when he's starving to death, he was like, you know what? This is too hard. I just can't do this anymore. And Paul gave up, the one who was perfectly designed to get to the Roman emperor, who that we know 200-ish years later, Christianity becomes accepted over the entire world as the new religion. What if Paul was like, too many bad days in a row. I just can't do it, God. I would understand that. I've lived that one. But he didn't. See, everything falls apart if we don't play our part on the team. Church is a team sport. I am not going to do everything around here. Some of you were here a couple years ago when I tried leading worship. Thank you, Wes. No one wants to have me up here, not even with videos behind me and turned up and my microphone down. No one still wants that. I also do not want that. I didn't want to be here doing that. All of us play our roles. All of us have our jobs. And we've got to know this. Paul could not be Paul if the 12 apostles didn't do what God called them to do. And the 12 apostles could not do all of the miracles, all of the reaching out to all the different places and sending people off to Asia Minor and then to Africa and to different places. They couldn't do that if Paul wasn't being Paul. It wouldn't work. God sat back, he put a team together, he put a game plan together and said, I need you all working together. So what's your role on this team? We can talk about the capital C church as in all of us in the world, or we can talk about here at Catalyst. What is your role? Because everyone wants to be a part of something bigger than them. Everyone wants to be a part of a team. But if you choose to be on a team, if you want to be on a successful team, you have to do your job. If you don't do your job, you will not be a successful team. Jesus defeated everything. We know we're on the winning team. But boy, some days it would be a whole bunch easier if everybody did their job. If we all did the role that Jesus specifically created us for in our mother's wombs. Like if Jeremiah, I have plans for you to prosper you. Like if we actually bought into that, even on our dark days, and we still played the roles, not trying to do everybody's job, because some of us like to do that, but just said, here's where I fit in, and I'm going to do this better than anybody. See, there's only one team, and it is led by Jesus. And either you are a part of this team or you are not. Period. Now, some of you, like we saw this morning with the baptisms, like, I'm coming forward, I'm joining the team, here we are, everybody can see it. Like, no one can hide this anymore. Some of you say you follow Jesus, but if we look at your actions, it's really hard to see that you're following Jesus. And not my job to judge. Jesus gets that job. Scott doesn't get to say who gets in and out of heaven because some of y'all might be in trouble on some days. Be nice to me. But I don't have that power. But if we looked at how you were acting, how you were living, where you were going, what you're spending your money on, what you're saying, it would be really hard to say, they're on that team. I started coaching high school football recently. These guys let me come over to Western and hang out with them. They were like, you know what we need? We need a receivers coach. Scott looks like our guy. Exactly right. It's okay. It's okay. Like, this is not the receiver. Like, this is, I get this. Thankfully, what they need is some blocking receivers. And it's like, oh, blocking I can get down on. Like, we can work on that, right? And it's great to be back, like being around people who are competitive, who are working towards the same goal, who are being reminded, who get together regularly, who are pushing each other's buttons, trying to get better every day. It's good to be back in that. If you guys grew up in some of those atmospheres, you're like, man, I forget what that's like. It's so good, because you won't always be on a team that does stuff like that, and you can miss it. But here's the thing. There are people on the team that we know just want to be on the team, right? They want to wear their jerseys on Fridays. They're like, oh, on the team. And then they come out to practice and they're always hurt, or they don't go very hard, or you're just like, well, they just want to say they're on the team, but they don't want to put in any effort in making the team better. I'm sure your team's never had anything like that. Every team's got some people like that. And some of you today are showing up and you're saying, I want to be on Jesus' team, but I don't want to put in any effort or any work. I want to wear the jersey on Sunday. I just want to look good, and I want to walk in, and I want to know the right words to say and the things to do, but you're not doing anything to move this team forward. Your actions and your priorities don't show it. And everyone has a place where we need to be. Everyone has a role we need to fill on the team. You cannot say you are part of the team if you're still in the stands watching the game. You need to get in the game. Now, some of you have been in the game and you played for a good long time, and you're like, you know what, I'm tired. I'm going to go to the stands. You're not on the team anymore. You quit. Some of you have joined the team. We got a couple who's like, I joined it this morning. What am I supposed to do? And they're fresh into it, and somebody needs to come alongside of them and say, here's what we got for you. Here's what we got for you. We're going to start you off with the basic stuff that all of us do. We're going to figure out where you're great, and we're going to help you be even better in those areas. And that's what it looks like to join this. And some of you are like, I just don't know what to do if the band wants to go ahead and come. I don't know what to do. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, gives us some idea of, here are the roles you could play. These aren't all of the roles, but these are some good roles you can play. If you don't know what your job is on this team yet, you need to figure it out. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 says, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. We had a good acoustic worship this morning. I enjoyed it. I enjoy a full band worship. I enjoy it. A true and proper worship seems like, here's all of me, Jesus. I don't get to make decisions for my life anymore. I don't get to be in charge of my life anymore. It is yours. You take it. You do with it whatever you want to. It seems to me like he's saying that is true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Some things have got to change. And after those things change, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. God, I don't know what you want from me. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? What role am I supposed to play on this team? You've got to get your head right first. And once you get your head right, then you understand God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. For by the grace given to me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith that God has distributed to each of you. Humility goes a long way. Thinking that you know more than everybody else because you've shown up to a building longer than everybody else, may want to look at that. For just as each one of us has one body with many members, and these members all do not have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. That's big. I think we missed that. I need you to do your job because you are a part of who I am. You belong to me. We belong to each other. If I'm not doing my job, you cannot win. If you are not doing your job, I cannot win. We belong to one another. When you gave Jesus and He was the Lord of your life, you don't have some decisions anymore. He's in charge. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. Some of you have little faith, you'll prophesy little. Some of you have big faith, you'll prophesy much. If it is in serving, then serve. If it is in teaching, then teach. If it is encouraging, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. You need to know your roles in the kingdom. You need to buy into what those roles are. You need to help move the kingdom forward because you are playing your role. Because we all belong to one another. We are one body. And when one body part doesn't work right, the whole body does not work right. And if you say, here, Catalyst, this is my crew, then we need to be that. We need to be one body, working together, moving the kingdom forward, pointing to Jesus the entire time. Some of you know what you need to do because you've done it before and you need to get back doing it. Get busy. Some of you are like, I'm early on into this and I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. Come find us. Come find me. Come find the elders. We will get you in the right direction. We will help you find out what it is you're good at and what part of the body you are and get you started. I'm telling you, I am ready to move things forward. God has got some big plans here, and God is God. He can do it with or without us, but I feel like He wants to use us. He wants to use you, if you will let Him use you. And if you will, we will see things happen here that people just won't believe. I know I want to be a part of something bigger than me. I believe you want to be a part of something bigger than you. Let's let it start today.